What's up, everybody? A special Saturday edition of the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. We had intended to go live yesterday, and a lot of scheduling snafus occurred. You just can't pin us down to a specific date, time. We're all over the place, but we're still coming at you with Bengals content, particularly as one of the most anticipated training camps in Bengals history is commencing at this point in time. I'm Anthony Cosenza. He is John Sheeran. John playing like a champ and moving things around to make this happen on a Saturday afternoon. How are you, bud?
I mean, this is partially my fault. We could have gone yesterday, but I decided to wait until today to take you out of the pool of your family vacation and put you back in the hotel room. So appreciate you being here, buddy.
It's all good. It's all good. We got the kids wrangled in there now, doing the pool thing, and so now we can do our thing, talking some Bengals. Training camp has commenced. Wait, John, before we kind of get to our formal kind of topics that we like to, volley back and forth our opinions and analysis and I don't know, thoughts, whatever. But when we posted this article to, where people can stream the thing on YouTube and everything on Cincy Jungle, we kind of put, this is arguably the most anticipated and or maybe important off seasons or training camps rather for the Cincinnati Bengals in recent history and maybe in team history. Is that hyperbole in your estimation? Or is this really in terms of long-term trajectory, long-term success and what the Bengals are going to do in 2024? Is this the most important one in a really long time?
I'm scared to talk about it. I feel like I've done a good job of not addressing the uninjured elephant in the room. I guess we can.
Don't you say his name? Don't you say his name?
I'm not going to do it. He's got new hair. I'll say that.
He's also trying his right leg out at punting these days.
Right. Yeah, if he's not throwing with in his normal amount of reps during practice, he's at least getting some punts in case he needs to be an emergency punter. By the way, the Bengals have 3 punters now on the team, so I don't know why he's even bothering with that. But I guess if he wants to do that, by all means, yeah, right. So this is so far so good. Right, everything is going as planned for the most part. Right, there's a guy he's accustomed to throwing to where he's not practicing yet, and we could talk about that. But no, I think just getting those reps in with all the other guys, just making sure that the offense goes on schedule and just everything is kind of going according to how it should be at this time. Right, there's not a ton of catching up to do right before the season, and no one's scrambling a week before week 1. It's just there's still 6 weeks to go here, and they're getting quality practices in. It's because pretty much everyone is there, everyone's able to do so, and even the guys who aren't practicing, they're still with the team, still by them, they're still getting their individual work in. So I think in the sense of being different already compared to recent training camps, yeah, there's an importance of just having a sense of normalcy, which so far is the feel.
It's funny. When I've arrived at training camp and everyone saw his new haircut and all that kind of stuff, they're saying, "Oh, are we going to cut our hair this way? Are we going to, or is this going to be the trend for Cincinnati faithful, Bengals fans, all that kind of stuff?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's funny." And later towards the end of this week, because you could tell with how the schedule and when we had to go live here, we had so many things going on this week that I actually was cutting. I have hair clippers at home. I was cutting, just kind of trimming up my hair a little bit, and I'm going with each passing buzz across the sides and in the back and all that kind of stuff. By the way, that's why when I cut my own hair, that's why I wear hats, because I just do a butcher job on the thing. But I was like, man, should I for the next show? Should I? I was close.
His influence is insane because he can grow out his hair completely long like he did last year, and put a headband on, and that'll start a movement. And then he could do the exact opposite thing out of sheer boredom, and all of a sudden just start up a whole new dialogue. I honestly think he does it just to screw with us, just because he knows that his
I wouldn't
influence
doubt
reaches
it.
no bounds. And yeah, like I guess it was a bet with BJ Hill. It's like, hey, if you do this, I'll do it. And now BJ Hill's got to do it because that man also likes to put his hair on the line. Mind you, last year he shaved his head because Jermaine Pratt re-signed with the Bengals, and that was his whole thing. Like, if Pratt comes back, then he would go bald, and he did. So there's a reason to believe why he will also join the buzzed and bleached club here pretty shortly.
Well, this is the Orange and Black Insider presented by the Believe Podcast Network on the audio side of things. You can see our beautiful little header up top now that we added to the great classic graphic that we had. And of course, we haven't shouted him out in a while. Dalton Signature doing great graphic design work. So I know he's been on social doing a lot of stuff. So he has that classic headphones Orange and Black Insider logo you see back there. But we are part of the Believe Network, and you can get this show on the audio side of things on iTunes and Spotify and other major audio streamers. So go do that. You have to resubscribe to our new feed, though. The old feed that was with the Cincy Jungle channel, that is defunct. So you have to go and subscribe to that feed. We'll put that in the comments. We'll continue to promote that out there. And our channel, Believe in Cincy, of course, has this show, 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin, talking football with Bengal Jim and friends, coming on the heels of a great Jungle Jam event a week ago today. We did have some highlights from Jason and Kevin who were at the event there. Hopefully you caught that on YouTube. And of course, Matt and Willie No Ball with the coach, Matt Minnick, and Willie Lett's new addition to the Believe in Cincy team. Happy to have him aboard. All of those are on your Believe in Cincy audio channel. And of course, if you like the video side of things, you can get to us on our YouTube channel underneath John and that Cincy Jungle icon beneath on that below right-hand side of your screen. You can click that show icon, click the subscribe button that pops right up from there. Click the bell to be notified when we go live and when new content is available. And of course, give us a thumbs up on YouTube if you would be so kind. We appreciate it. Also streaming to Cincy Jungle's Facebook page, a couple of Twitter accounts. Unfortunately, the Cincy Jungle Twitter account hasn't been streaming it live, so we'll have to kind of retweet some of the other streams there for you to check out. But yeah, we appreciate all the support, and we're excited that training camp is upon us. So where do we want to start, John? Do we want to start with who's been impressing, what's been new, or do you want to start with the new players that were added this week? Where do you want to begin? I'm gonna give you the choice, my friendo.
I feel like we have to start with the wide receivers, and we can talk about the guys who are playing right now. There's 3 that's really standing out. Like the fact that T. Higgins is out there, he's getting all of his work in. I think it's just been about him getting back into the swing of things. He's been doing his work, in his own time, on his own schedule, away from the team before he signed the franchise tag. But signing the franchise tag is leading all the drills right now, looking like the same old T. Higgins, at least before last season, before things kind of went off the rails. And just having him kind of lead the charge with a bunch of young guys behind him, I think has been good to see. And obviously getting that connection up to speed with Burrow. There was one, I think, passing play on the first practice where Burrow seemed to have overthrown him, but he kind of clarified like it was kind of his fault as to why he didn't get under it, and he was a little taken aback by how powerful that Burrow's passes are. Like he seems, obviously he's as big as he's ever been, according to Zach Taylor, about 215, 220 pounds. So I think Burrow's getting the feel of how his arm strength is with his new type of physique. So Higgins kind of getting back in the swing of things has been a positive. But then Andre Yoshivas and Jermaine Burton, I think, have been the low-key stars of the position group, just because they've been getting reps with, Jamar Chase not being out there practicing with everyone. Yoshi's been in the slot. He's been on the outside. He's pretty much catching everything that's coming his way. Like, his hands look phenomenal. His footwork, and his route running look much improved compared to last year. And Burton just being the rookie who was impressing in OTAs and seems to have taken all that momentum and all that progress and is putting out there in training camp now with the actual defense going up against him. So I think it's been nothing but positives for the receivers who have been out there. And obviously when you have your quarterback out there actually getting all these reps in and building this chemistry up before the season, that's probably been the biggest takeaway for me so far.
Your top are, arguably your top 4 guys in that rotation, in that depth chart. You're talking, Chase and Higgins and Burton and Yoshi now. Those are all guys that are a little bit interchangeable in terms of playing inside and outside. And that's what's going to make this offense really, really tough to defend. And I love you and I both love Tyler Boyd and everything that he brought to this team and everything. Pretty strictly, I mean, unless it was in 2019 out of absolute necessity, got pushed outside because of injuries and all that kind of stuff, pretty much relegated to your standard classic slot receiver guy. I think the Bengals loved what he did for this team in the locker room, on the field. Of course, I know the fans did as well, but they've evolved a little bit on offense to have these guys that can be effective in the slot, but also push out side as well. You're seeing that from Yoshi. You're seeing that from Burton. Higgins does a little bit of that, and Chase goes all over also. So, I mean, you're seeing a lot of things from a standpoint of, kind of a tough shell game for an opposing defense to try and game plan for. And I think that's been a real emphasis this time around. Yoshi, you've heard you've seen, I don't know if you've heard him, but Dan Horde on Twitter, if you follow him, the great Dan Horde, he has been all over the progress of Yoshi this offseason. I think we all kind of saw big things. Maybe that's dependent upon what happens long-term with T. Higgins. Maybe he's the guy that kind of becomes that taller guy that can play inside and outside like Higgins does. But man, I mean, for relying on some younger guys in this group, Yoshi and Burton, this group has a lot of excitement and a lot of athleticism and a lot of tricks up their sleeves, so to speak, going into this season, and that's exciting.
Yeah, I think with Yoshi, like the surprise of him being in the slot out of nowhere, because it wasn't something that they did in OTAs earlier this year, wasn't something that he did last year, and the whole talk has been about how they kind of replaced that position beyond from Tyler Boyd, and obviously Gesicki is getting reps in, and Burton has been developing and training in the offseason to kind of run those routes and kind of handle that role a little bit more than he's used to. So to have Yoshi in there kind of out of nowhere, at least from our perspective, like that just adds another layer of versatility that you can align these guys in multiple spots, and you can rotate and sub these guys in and out throughout the game, and you can kind of keep the defense on your heels a little bit, because it seemed like Yoshi was kind of like that outside only guy that like he could develop into an X receiver to line up on the line and have those release packages. But if you can put him in the slot too, like it's a benefit to any receiver who is in there. Like their production typically takes a type of increase, but you still have to be able to handle those routes and to just have comfort in that specific alignment. And this is, I guess, his first real exposure to it, and it was really just out of the recognition of wide receiver coach Troy Walters saying like he's probably one of our three best receivers out there right now, so we have to see if we can find a way to get him on the field. And in that position, I think Irwin was still on the outside with the starters, so they just put him in the slot just to see how he did, and it looked like he just passed it with flying colors. So if he can continue this kind of trend where he can be on the outside and inside, it's only going to allow him to stay on the field more.
And for what he showed as a rookie, Yoshi, that is, he, kind of was a very helpful guy in the red zone at certain points last year. And so, you and I have talked about this a lot in terms of the Bengals and their late in the year, postseason, obviously playing those hyper important AFC North games wherein the weather can be pretty tricky and it gets tough sledding to really put up a lot of the points that we know this offense can. Having some more adept red zone players really helps. Gesicki, there's a couple of clips out there. Forgive me, I can't remember if it was Caleb Noe or who else put it out there, but you see him kind of on some bootlegs from Browning, just a nice, easy pass. That's a big gainer that in a game, had that play taken place. That's a chain moving play and just a drive extender. You can see those types of plays also in the red zone down by the goal line where you kind of, you play action and you boot it out and you just toss it to a guy that kind of sinks past the defense there out in the flat. And these are the types of plays now that you hope are easy gains and turn field goal attempt drives into touchdown drives and really makes this a truly dominant offense.
Yeah, and I think with Gesicki obviously kind of being the new guy here, because at least Yoshi had reps with Burrow last year throughout his rookie season. It's really just for Gesicki been about how he kind of fits into all this, right? Because we know he's naturally talented and he's had productive seasons when he had quality quarterback play. But there have been times when, Burrow's been a little bit high and he's had to use his catch radius, and that kind of process is feeling out. But also, like, there's been times, I think, out between the snaps where there's communication between those two, and he'll be asking, okay, how should I release from this route, right? They're like, where should my timing be? Like, where do you want me in my spot at this part of the field? And there's been, I think, a recognition from Gesicki, like, there's a lot more flexibility and a lot more feedback from, his quarterback, Joe Burrow, compared to where he's been in years past. And I think that will allow him to be a little bit more free and confident what he does to make sure that, hey, like, I mean, the ball's going to be there. It's going to be accurate. It's from Joe Burrow. Like, he's going to see plenty of targets. But if there's a comfort level of, hey, like these are the routes that I like to run, if I can help you out by making sure that I'm in the right spot, like, that process is all kind of feeling out right now. And that's why it's valuable to get these reps in with the starting quarterback to make sure that you're not just ice cold and you don't really know what that dynamic is going to be in week one. So that's just been another positive of Burrow being out there for at least one of his new weapons.
Yeah. So Bengals wide receivers looking pretty good. The running backs are looking pretty good from, again, kind of a limited contact type of standpoint. They're all in the concussion helmet shells and all of that. So, I mean, obviously limiting contact early in training camp, but Chase Brown making some plays, Zach Moss looking to kind of make some plays. So that's exciting there. And then, of course, on the offensive line, you got a little bit of a shakeup. Trent Brown, not on PUP, but on the NFI list, working to come back as we start training camp. So that means Marius Mims is starting at right tackle. Looking pretty good by most accounts here. Obviously, athleticism and size, et cetera, off the charts. Willie Anderson, who has been in attendance the last couple of days, knows a thing or two about offensive tackle, right tackle play, and he's pretty impressed with the Bengals' first-round pick too. So, there's some rumblings, maybe, oh boy, what does this mean for Trent Brown going forward? Maybe this was a little bit of an expectation from the Bengals just because of Trent Brown's injury history, his sheer size too, right? I mean, just, dog days of summer and all that kind of stuff. I mean, maybe you just kind of want to, take a break there. What you got from him for the most part when he's healthy and out there. So maybe they're just kind of taking it slow. This doesn't necessarily mean Mims is going to immediately latch onto that starting right tackle spot, but he has a good opportunity to kind of really open some eyes and say, should this be a competition? Should he be the guy right away or sometime in this season? John, this reminds me a little bit, if you remember, and we've been lucky to have one of these guys on our show, and he was one of the most gracious, nicest guys ever. Brief stint with the team, and who I think should be a Hall of Famer, Richmond Webb, played for the Bengals in like 01, 02, and the Bengals drafted Levi Jones in that time. And Webb, kind of towards the end of his career, was kind of the tutor for Levi Jones. And then ultimately the Bengals were like, hey, Levi Jones is too good to keep off the field here. So he ended up kind of taking that spot. Maybe that's a similar thing that happens here with Mims and Brown. But at this, for me, I still think the Bengals stick with the veteran until something really tells them Mims, with his limited tape in it, is immediately ready to play in the NFL and play against the likes of TJ Watt and Myles Garrett, et cetera.
Yeah, I would say not just for this position, but for the entirety of the depth chart. If there's a battle that you believe is going to go one way or the other based off of just your intuition and experience, that's probably what it is right now. I think Zach Taylor made an emphasis this past week during the annual media luncheon where it's players are going to play some days, they're going to have some days off, we're going to get some guys on the field. Don't look into who's starting and who's not at the moment and who's kind of being subbed in and out. So I think with the right tackle position, if Trent Brown was able to practice, he would probably still be penciled in as the starter. But the one thing about Trent Brown is that he's had durability issues. The one thing about Amarius Mims is that he needs to see the field as soon as possible to get reps. I don't think we realized it would happen this quickly where the two would kind of collide. We don't know what it is with Trent Brown. Zach Taylor mentioned tightness, and he's been pretty adamant in recent years about making sure that to not overwork these guys when you don't need to. I think tightness, especially last year, was a big lesson for all of them. So just taking as much precaution as possible. And obviously, Trent Brown, even if he was healthy, he was going to get rest days, like you mentioned. He's 31 years old. He's been through enough of these camps to know how to take care of his body and how to get ready for Sundays when the games actually start to count. So we weren't going to see Trent Brown having full participation in practice anyways, even if he was completely ready. He's probably good enough to practice now. If not, he would probably be on the physically unable to perform list. The
Right.
NFI is pretty
Right.
ambiguous. It could be an illness. It could be something. Obviously, like with college players, like Eric All is on the NFI list because he suffered a torn ACL in Iowa, so he didn't suffer the injury in the NFL. But even though it was technically a football injury, right? So it's a little bit more unclear compared to the PUP list, where it's typically guys who were injured the previous season. So odds are it's pretty minor for Trent Brown, but minor injuries have kind of piled up over the course of his career. And this is just a case of, hey, we don't need you right now. There's still 40-something days until the regular season. But this first-round pick that we've had, he only played 800 snaps in college. And he's got a chance to go up against quality edge rushers on a day-to-day basis in an NFL offensive line and get that exposure and get that direct feedback from all those reps from the offensive line coach, Frank Pollock. It's not a perfect scenario, but considering it's not a major injury that Trent Brown apparently suffered, it's not the worst either. Like they're in a pretty good spot.
So it's a double-edged sword, right? Mims is getting those needed reps that you want right away, kind of throw him in the fire and grow as a rookie, whether or not he ends up starting regular season games right away down the road, all that kind of stuff. Just getting those reps, getting the mental reps, hearing the terminology, getting the continuity, all that good stuff. On the flip side, if you are going to rely, and I guess I want to see if you think I'm overreacting on this. On the flip side, if you do have Trent Brown kind of waiting out there, not taking the reps, but he is your expected starter, he is your guy to start early in this season, that's your expectation. We now have another conversation about continuity, playing time, being out there with the group. You have yet another new right tackle. What is that, 3 in as many years, if not more? I mean, so again, you're talking about this, the slow starts and all that kind of stuff. It's one player, but it is an important piece. That tackle piece is a very important piece for this Bengals team, and they can ill afford a slow start, particularly with the way that the schedule shapes up for them early this season. Am I just suffering PTSD from the last couple of years in terms of the slow starts and everything? Or is this just, hey, precautionary, we're way early in the game, he may be out there a little bit later and we're okay?
Probably more of the latter. I think if Trent Brown didn't practice at all in training camp and then he was just thrusted out there week 1 as the starter, then you would probably run into some of those issues because, yeah, like you're right. The offensive line is still a cohesive unit that needs to work as one. Even if Trent Brown is at his best when he's on an island in pass protection, that's part of the reason why he's brought in. He still needs to have like the timing and the communication with his other guys. So there's not like 5 false starts a game coming from him. So, again, I think him being on the NFI now, like they can't put him back on there once he returns to practice. So this was, I think, just something that kind of popped up right before training camp and just giving him some extra time before he starts going out to practice. And then naturally, I think even if he was healthy, it was going to be a good mix and balance of both these guys getting reps. So there was already that sense of you don't have complete total continuity with just one guy at the position. So they were going to already have to kind of take on that challenge. Now it's just a little bit different because it's really just one guy at the moment, and then you're just kind of waiting to see if the veteran, the presumed starter, is going to return anytime soon. So until that happens, like we'll see kind of how it goes. But I think this was always going to be kind of a dual effort of getting both guys reps and making sure that they were both up to speed with in case either one ends up starting in week 1.
It's a good point because there are questions for both of them, inexperience being one for Mims and limited college snaps, obviously, getting him up to speed for the NFL game, and then, of course, the injury stuff with Trent Brown. So you do have to make sure that both guys are as prepped as possible because we've seen stuff happen with Trent Brown, unfortunately, with the injury stuff. And Mims, you just, you got to slow that learning curve as much as you can for him. But those are some of the kind of some of the things happening with the Cincinnati Bengals and the sights and sounds so far. Obviously, we've seen Burrow kind of have the on days, off days, that sort of thing, aside from his new haircut and everything else. We've seen him punt the ball. We've seen, Browning make some nice plays. And those wide receivers in particular are really impressing early in training camp going forward. The Bengals did sign 3 new players. And as you mentioned earlier, we've got yet another punter added to this mix. And I will say this, I think you maybe alluded to it a little bit with T. Higgins, but there's kind of a re-emphasis for some of these players. It appears, and granted, this might be training camp speak, but there's some rumblings out there that some of these players who had some struggles last year, T. Higgins being one and Brad Robbins being another, really tweaking their diets, their workout regimens. T. Higgins has kind of come out and said, I'm not putting basically any junk in my body, that sort of thing. He's eating a lot cleaner and hoping that kind of pays dividends. And we know that diet is a big part of the whole nutrition, fitness type of situation. And then you've got Brad Robbins, who apparently put on a little bit of weight, muscle and whatnot to add some oomph to that big hang time that he is known for on his punts, because there were some struggles from him last year. So the Bengals bring in 3 new guys, John. And I loved the way you put it. You kind of, I don't want to say you put the Bengals on blast, but you really kind of, you took them to task a little bit. They said, hey, we are not signing a veteran corner. And a day later, 2 days later, they signed Nate Brooks, who's a corner who has experience with the Niners and bounced around a little bit. Really, really intriguing player. Hakeem Butler, the reigning player of the year in the other football league there, a big guy, maybe a little bit Auden-Tate-ish a little bit. Ryan Reckow, the punter, and then, as I said, Nate Brooks. So you have some thoughts on these moves. Someone like Butler could be one of those guys that, the Bengals always seem to have this one guy in their training camps, an undrafted guy, a dark horse guy that ends up maybe sneaking onto the roster or, figuring something out. I don't know. What do you see from these 3 guys going forward in their chances on being Bengals long-term this season?
Yeah, so it was Monday when Duke Tobin was asked about the possibility of the team signing a veteran cornerback, and he used the word no multiple times. And that is a question where if he were to answer ambiguous and be like, hey, things are on the table, you never know how things are going to go. No one would have blinked an eye just because of the situation at cornerback. You don't have an established starter on the opposite side of the field from where Cam Taylor-Britt is. You have a battle going on between a second-year player who had an up-and-down rookie season in DJ Turner and a guy who never played outside cornerback in college or the NFL in Dax Hill. So it was natural for that to be a question mark of the defense. So that's why the question was asked. But he just said, no, I don't foresee that happening. And then they sign a guy. So that to me was either there was miscommunication with the coaching staff and the personnel department about what the team needs, and they had a conversation, or there was a secret injury that we don't know about, or it could be maybe like DJ Ivey, who is still recovering on the PUP. Maybe they don't foresee him to be back anytime soon, and maybe he misses the start of the regular season, so this gives him more depth to make it out of training camp in the preseason. But Nate Brooks, like you said, he played for the 49ers. It's one of 6 teams in the NFL that he's been with over the past 4 or 5 years, but he's mainly done his damage in the UFL, most recently with the Michigan Panthers. I believe he was first-team All-UFL this past season,
Yep.
And I believe Hakeem Butler can say the same because he was, like you said, the UFL Offensive Player of the Year. And kind of like Brooks, he's been in the league since 2019, and he's done practically nothing in the NFL. All of his success has come in the XFL and then UFL, with A.J. McCarron, mind you, as his quarterback for the St. Louis Battlehawks. So he's had 2 back-to-back really productive years at the lower level professional league, if you will. And like you said, he's a big guy, 6'5", 230, which kind of leads me to wonder, with 11 receivers already on the team and you have questions at tight end, are you going to see him take reps at both? Or are you going to bulk him up? The plan there is questionable to me, but you brought him in obviously with some type of plan. But yeah, he was chance to making the team is probably better at tight end if you were to do that. But they already did all that with Auden-Tate, so you don't know how that whole thing is going to go. But yeah, the third punter is the most interesting thing here. I think it's fine to have 2 guys and Robbins and McNamara and options for a competition, but to make sure that one guy doesn't get overly exerted during training camp in the preseason, so you have guys sharing reps. That's why sometimes in the past they've had multiple kickers, to make sure that the starting kicker was fresh for the regular season. Now 3 are in the picture, and I don't know if this was just they had an extra roster spot because now they're up to 90, and he was the best free agent on their board who was available at the time. If they really liked him coming out of college, he's a rookie out of BYU who spent some time with the Chiefs and OTAs in the spring, and he was a really good punter in college, mind you, but still, there's only one that's going to make the team. Maybe one's going to stick around the practice squad. I don't know. This was also something that McNamara or Robbins maybe secretly dealing with, so they want to give them extra rest, or if they really like this guy, want to throw him into the competition. I have no idea how that's going to all turn out.
Two thoughts, a couple of those things that you brought up. Number one, I think like a lot of people, you go, man, 3 punters. I don't really get that, but I do like the Bengals when you look at that, and then you look at if Butler's going to be this maybe flex type player, right? Wide receiver, tight endish type of player. They are looking at their weak spots last year and say we are vetting these spots for good and making sure that we are tightly knit, tightly wrapped up, and have all the right guys in place, be it on the active roster or guys waiting in the wings on the practice squad in these weaker areas that hurt them last year, right? So I like that. I also think it's kind of funny, if we're talking about Butler maybe doing tight end type of stuff, Gesicki being slot receiver / tight end. You had Tanner Hudson last year being kind of that receiving tight end. You've got a flex H-back player, Drew Sample. It's really, really funny how a couple of years ago, everyone's like, why is Auden Tate not playing tight end? Why is Auden Tate not? Now, all of a sudden, it's almost like the Bengals have offenses evolved in this respect also, where they're like, oh, we're putting more flex players in the tight end. We're investing heavily in the tight end spot. You mentioned Eric All. There's a clip out there. Forgive me, I don't remember who it was on Twitter that posted it, but there is a video out there of him looking pretty dang good, doing some drills as he's looking to come back as well. So, the Bengals are again, tight end was a weak spot for him last year. It was not deep. There were injuries. There were all kinds of stuff going on there. And so they have invested heavily in that position, be it in free agency or the draft. And then, you look at punter and what they're trying to do there, 2 of the weaker spots of the team. And they're saying what we got out of that was largely out of those spots was largely unacceptable. And we're moving in a different direction. We're going to make sure whether it is the incumbent that is going to play or stay on the roster or somebody new, we're going to make sure that we've got people in place on the practice squad and on the active roster to do the job.
That's actually such a good point because their best tight end last year was Tanner Hudson, who's pretty much just a big slot. Mike Gesicki is literally a big slot. He's rarely going to be in line. Tanner McLaughlin is probably a better receiver than blocker as a rookie coming into the league. And now you have Hakeem Butler, who I think is going to be probably similar to Hudson and Gesicki. Big slot, maybe see some time in line, but you don't really want him outside because he's not going to have the speed to beat outside corners. So they have an identity at the position to be sure. And Eric All, who's not even practicing it, like you mentioned, I think it was, oh God, I just thought of his name. Yeah, it's going to fade for me, but shout out to that guy who got the footage from the bridge.
I know, I feel bad.
one of the bridge warriors, per usual, because I believe training camp has been closed to just the general public. It's just been season ticket holders, so shout out to him. But yeah, he looks good. Hopefully he can come back, but he's probably got the most experience of just inline blocking outside of Drew Sample, right? Drew Sample now sticks out like a sore thumb, who's just mainly just a blocker at this point. So at least they got that.
Yeah, and for me, I feel like whether he ends up making the active roster or not, and it's an uphill climb at that, how deep that position group that we've talked about, wide receiver, and now tight end too, but however they want to use him, I just feel like Butler, based on being, a UFL star and then coming in here, this feels like preseason star mismatch against, the lower tier corners that he'll be going up against. I feel like he's going to be kind of one of the preseason stars that everybody's like, oh, we got to find a place for this guy, right? Maybe that's a hot take or whatever, but I just feel like, the size, you look at the size and where they may play him. And then you look at preseason, who are some of the guys he may be going up against? That just seems to me like a guy that'll stand out quite a bit, particularly if it is a fringe starting quarterback like Jake Browning throwing him the ball at certain points in the game.
Yeah, it's just there's 12 receivers now on the team, and it's like that's 4 units of 3 receivers sets. So if he's number 12, if he's number 10, number 9, I hope he sees the field because it would be interesting to see a guy that size who again has done pretty much next to nothing, even in the preseason. Like he had a terrible training camp last year with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he was cut. I think even before final cuts. So he's got a lot to prove at this level.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get to just a couple more things before we head on out of here, but this is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. Happy to have you with us, whether you're joining us live on this beautiful Saturday afternoon. I assume it's beautiful in Cincinnati, Ohio as well, John. Beautiful Saturday afternoon live or after the fact hopefully by your subscription to the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. Hopefully you have resubscribed to that to get our show, Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends, 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin, and Matt and Willie No Ball with the coach Matt Minnick and Willie Lutz. Hopefully you are enjoying the content that all of us are putting out here. We're trying to stagger it for you. Schedules are a little wacky. We're going to try and get things a little more dialed in to make sure that we get you content, hopefully for every day of the week, if not more, throughout the training, the preseason, the regular season, and beyond, hopefully the postseason. You can also, as I mentioned earlier, get to our YouTube channel by clicking the show icon underneath John and by that Cincy Jungle icon in the bottom right corner. So do all the things that come with that, the subscribe, the bell, all that kind of stuff. We appreciate it. Like the Cincy Jungle Facebook page, and of course, keep it to cincyjungle.com and what John, I guess it's this way, not the other way, what John is doing at A to Z Sports, calling out the Bengals when they are a little hypocritical about adding a position or not adding a position. So go check out all of that. He's doing great stuff over there covering the Bengals and the AFC North. Speaking of hypocrites, John Sheeran, and it's not the player that is listed there on the banner. It is the people that are covering some of the things happening with this player, that being Ja'Marr Chase. And the latest there, I have learned that I understand why Mike Brown speaks probably once or twice a year. I get it. I finally get it, because he says something and he says it in his 80-some-year-old vernacular, and people just take it and chomp at the bit of it because of who the Bengals used to be, because of the lack of success that they had, and really when he was largely spearheading a lot of those unsuccessful campaigns in the 90s and early 2000s. There are a lot of old stigmas that somehow still follow this team, even though they aren't wholly true. And so Ja'Marr Chase is now entering his 4th season. He will undoubtedly get the 5th-year option, right? And so he has it, rather, yeah. So he's got it. And so he's locked in. The Bengals haven't come to an agreement with, long-term contract, that sort of thing this summer. Sometimes they still do it throughout training camp, especially when parties are back kind of together and a little more face-to-face. We've seen that happen with some of the Bengals stars with mini extensions, large extensions, that sort of thing. But somehow when Mike Brown addressed the media early this week, as training camp was kicking off, it's just not a great, maybe not the best time to negotiate right now with training camp and focus and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure they're referencing the stuff with Jesse Bates that happened recently. Things. We've seen him do deals closer to the season sometimes, not all the time, but somehow this has turned into Mike Brown is not going to pay Ja'Marr Chase, and Ja'Marr Chase will not be a Bengal long-term, or there is a chance of that happening, despite him being dialed in next year for his contract at the very minimum. Then the Bengals, even if they wanted to, could do the franchise tag thing from there, all of that. So you've got him this year, you've got him next year, you got him potentially another year into it, and then you have all that time to potentially negotiate a long-term contract. Yet somehow the narrative is being spun, and not just by fans or people on Twitter with the 18 numbers behind their name on their screen name. It's being spun kind of by some NFL insiders and national talking heads that this is maybe the direction that's going to happen. And we have a really long time for this to still play out.
So I think there's 2 issues with this whole thing. One was, I think, unforeseen in that non-quarterbacks drafted in the first round in recent memory, even as good as they are in Ja'Marr Chase, very rarely have gotten paid after 3 years. It's because the 5th-year option just gives teams infinite amount of leverage to just say, hey, we got you under contract for 2 more years. We'll talk. We'll accelerate things when you enter your actual contract year, which is entering the 5th year of those deals. This year became an exception to that, and I don't think a lot of people expected that. The likes of Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, obviously the 2 receivers that went after Ja'Marr Chase in the 2021 draft. Even Penei Sewell got a bag. Christian Darrisaw just got paid by the Vikings. The elite players of that class who, again, were all drafted after Ja'Marr Chase, have all gotten paid, and I think at least 2 of them, like Sewell and Darrisaw, got like top of the market deals for their respective positions. So Jamar Chase is seeing that, and his agent is seeing that, and it's just kind of a change in the winds of how the NFL used to operate. Like the two best examples of the contrary happened in the past 12 months. Nick Bosa didn't get paid. The second overall pick, the elite edge rusher, he didn't get paid until right before his fifth year began. He got paid a market resetting deal. Justin Jefferson is entering his fifth year now. He just got paid this offseason. Obviously, his $35 million a year extension is now the baseline of what Jamar Chase should and rightfully will accept. And it's what the Bengals essentially alluded to when Mike Brown talked about this. The verbiage of bending over backwards doesn't necessarily mean, try to penny pinch to pay one of the best receivers in the league. Like,
it means the opposite.
Exactly. When Jamar Chase gets paid, he will be the top paid receiver. I think he knows that, his agent knows that, and the Bengals know that. But they expected this timeline to still have another year of comfortability because that's the kind of the way it's always been, and especially for them. It's been a long time, actually, since the Bengals have had a non-quarterback first-round pick worthy of an extension like this. In fact, the last extension that they've had for a player of this caliber, not even this caliber, like a first-round pick, not quarterback, so not Joe Burrow, it was Drake Kirkpatrick, who signed an extension right before he entered free agency after he got the fifth-year option. So that happened in 2017 when he was a first-round pick in 2012. A.J. Green was drafted the year before, and he got paid right before his fifth year began. So the timeline has always been, for Jamar Chase in the history of the Bengals under this collective bargaining agreement, it's always been right before this fifth year, and that was the expectation entering this offseason. I think with just other elite players of this draft class getting contracts on an earlier timeline, it's been an unexpected development for, I think, the Bengals, where they didn't expect to really be dealing with all this noise. And obviously Jefferson getting paid as well kind of at least it put things in like, oh, yeah, Jamar Chase is ready to get paid now because now he knows what the baseline is. So they don't have to do anything. Obviously, Jamar can do what he's doing when we can talk about what he's doing. But I think this was just a couple of things kind of combining to where this is now. And now, of course, the collective we are trying to make it a story when it probably isn't.
It probably isn't. And the other thing to take into account is that the Bengals are one of a few teams. I think the Eagles are one of them, right? But one of a few teams dealing with a mega contract to their quarterback. They're trying to deal with another wide receiver and get him a long-term deal that they would like to get done, but that's far apart, and that's been kind of all over the place. And then you want Chase signed as well. And then you've got, you had the Hendrickson, mini blip that happened and all kinds of different things that happened. So there's been a lot of things to shuffle, to try and sort out. And there are players that, because, again, it's not that Chase isn't a priority. He falls on the back a little bit, maybe on the priority list because of the timeline that you mentioned, right? There are more pressing players whose contracts are up next year, whose, the salary cap hits or this and that next year. And so this, again, the Bengals feel like, hey, we wish we would have liked to have had this settled a little sooner. We've still got another offseason that we feel we can get something done. So we've got a little time on this one. We've got some other things that we're working on here with T. Higgins and others that we would like to try and get settled. So it's not that Chase as a player is not the priority. It's the timeline that maybe takes a little bit of a backseat to some of these other players whose timelines are bumped up because they are not set to be Bengals next year or that sort of thing.
And of course, Chase is doing his own thing. I think he understands the Bengals mindset, but it doesn't change the fact that all these other guys at his position have gotten paid, especially this offseason, and he's still set to I'm going to avoid doing what Adam Schefter did. I think Jamar Chase has already been paid his $3.8 million roster bonus for being on the roster a couple days after training camp begins. If that hasn't been paid, it's going to be paid within the next couple of days of this recording, and then he's on pace to make about $1 million in base salary this year. But obviously that pales in comparison to the signing bonuses that the likes of Calvin Ridley and Justin Jefferson have gotten. So there's obviously that sense of, hey, I would like that money now too if I'm eligible. But there's a difference obviously between what he's doing and what CD Lamb is doing, right? CD Lamb hasn't reported to Cowboys training camp. He's eyeing a new deal. He's entering his contract year, so it's a bit more of a pressing matter for him. But with Chase, he's doing what Brandon Ayuk is doing, which is being with the team, being at the facilities, being at practice, but it's not putting his body into harm's way. Because to be honest, Jamar Chase can start practicing on September 1st, and his 6 years of experience of catching passes from Joe Burrow, he's going to be fine week 1, right? He knows, like, and he's still putting in work, right? I think after practices, he's still catching balls out of the jug machine. He's talking with players constantly. He's talking with coaches, his fellow receivers. He's giving advice. He's being there in practice so that he avoids like not reporting, which is a finable thing. And I think the team can still do something or like dock him for like 40,000 or something like that, but they don't want to do that, especially with him being there. So I think this is just him like saying like, hey, like I'm here, I'm still a part of this 100%. I don't want to be a distraction, but also like this is me saying, hey, like I want to be valued at a certain point, and I'm just going to preserve myself until I'm absolutely needed, which is totally fine.
And kudos to both, like you said, the Bengals could force a hand and do all this kind of stuff. And maybe in years past, if you want to call back narratives, in years past, that might have been the route they would have taken in a situation like this. We've seen them strong arm some certain players during contract stuff. Now it's been a while since they've done that, but this is the type of stuff. What T. Higgins has done in his franchise tag, what Jamar Chase is doing in this situation, that builds up goodwill and builds those bridges for further communication, negotiation between the sides. I could be, again, using hyperbole on that, but we've seen, if you want to call back on stuff with the Bengals, we have seen how this team has sometimes operated a while ago when players try and strong arm their way through certain things. That does not sit well and has not sat well with this ownership over the years. And I think some players, number one, they love being there. Number two, that you could tell how tight they are with each other in that locker room. And number three, I think this also is a little bit of a politics game where it's like, hey, sitting out and doing this thing, there's a lot of precedence here with the Bengals, Mike Brown, ownership, et cetera, that doesn't always go far. Playing nice and placating and that sort of thing, that goes a little further, I think. And I think hopefully it seems like T. Higgins and Jamar Chase maybe recognize a little bit of that in their respective situations, and hopefully that leads to good things and long-term deals for both of them down the road.
I think it's a good point. I think the counter though is that this is Jamar Chase and he's on track.
Just do it.
Right. Like, I mean, he's him in the most literal sense.
Yeah.
And he's gonna get that contract no matter what he does, so long as he stays healthy and his value is still there. But I think like the final point to be made here is that this is not just happening in Cincinnati. The way that it's being portrayed it with this situation, like the narratives around it, it makes it sound like this is like a uniquely bad thing. But like it's happening with the Cowboys. It's happening with multiple players with the San Francisco 49ers. It's what happens sometimes with good teams who have good players who are valuing themselves and who are making sure that by the time that they do sign on the dotted line, they are perfectly able to earn all the money that they signed for. And that's just part of the NFL. It's been a pretty consistent theme in recent years with the Bengals. Unfortunately, in some cases where it's been kind of a detrimental. But in terms of the contract disputes that they've had in recent years, whether it be with Hendrickson or Higgins or Bates, Chase being with the team and smiling through it all and still getting his work in, being around everyone, like there are definitely worse scenarios, and it's definitely not as bad as maybe some people on the national level have been making it seem.
Yeah. Well, let's get on out of here. I've done enough mic drop stuff today, it feels like, talking about Mike Brown and talking about precedents and lambasting certain people. So I don't know that I got much more on a mic drop before I get out of here. But what about you, John, as we head out to face the rest of this beautiful weekend?
Yeah, man. The Olympics have started, I think, in the past couple of days. I've watched the rugby final between France and Fiji before this recording. I was hoping to see more laterals because that's like, I've never watched a full rugby match before. I've seen clips, obviously, but I'm a huge fan of laterals. I think they should be involved more in football, and I was disappointed that there weren't as many in this rugby match. But like the game-winning touchdown was done by like this guy who was he looked like Brian Leonard out there. Apparently he's the greatest rugby player of all
Brian
time.
Leonard.
Dupont, I believe is his last name. He just like ran 80 meters. They don't use yards over there in Europe. And he just lateraled it at the very end to his teammate who scored. I don't know if it's not a touchdown, but he got into a zone in the end. I'll call it the end zone. But I just watching rugby just makes me want more laterals, more teams to have the balls to actually lateral the football, like what Travis Kelce did with the Chiefs, who unfortunately didn't count on that play because of offsides or whatnot. But just watching rugby in the limited time I did, I want any team to embrace laterals, and I would love it to be the Bengals, but this is the NFL, and they're cowards that way.
It's funny you say that because I saw a recent clip again from a movie. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's from the '90s. I think it was mid '90s, and I remember seeing this thing in the theaters when I was a kid. Little Giants with Rick Moranis and Ed O'Neill, and it's the classic underdog story and all that kind of stuff. And someone played. Yeah, I don't want to give it away for some people because that's kind of like in the same vein as like the Sandlot and all that kind of stuff and that same early mid '90s type of thing. But there's basically a play at the end where there's like a ton of laterals and the old, I don't know what you call it, the old Statue of Liberty or all that kind of stuff, hiding the ball and all kinds of different stuff. But they had like multiple laterals in this one play. And now that you're talking about laterals, was this also? I mean, I feel bad. I haven't been watching too much Olympics, but was this where this viral clip is gone of this young lady who's playing rugby and she is just? I think Kyle Brandt said he wants to give her an angry run scepter and all kinds of stuff. Was that in the Olympics that came about?
It wasn't the match that I saw. I don't know if that was from the Olympics, but I believe that she was on the New Zealand team.
Yeah,
it was Australia.
She was just making people hurt, man.
Give her a trial. You put her in pads and a helmet, and she'll have less fear.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take off. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everybody, and we'll get back to you next week. Hopefully a couple of times about training camp and different things like that. John, thanks for moving things around and being here on a weekend, my man. Go enjoy some family time, and we will be back with more coming at you. Take care, and this has been the Orange and Black Insider. We'll see you soon.